The planet was quiet when the human soldier arrived, his boots touching the alien soil for the first time. He was part of a small peacekeeping team sent to explore and mediate between human and alien civilizations. The mission wasn't supposed to be anything too dangerous, just a diplomatic meeting with the leaders of a warrior race. But as soon as he stepped off the shuttle and set foot on this alien world, he knew something was off. The air was thick with tension, a sharp contrast to the usual calmness of intergalactic peacekeeping. His mission was simple: talk, negotiate, and avoid conflict. However, the moment his boots hit the ground, he was escorted to a grand palace by towering, battle-hardened soldiers. They were unlike any humans he had ever met, large, muscular, their skin marked with battle scars, and their eyes full of a cold, calculating gaze. He was led into a large hall where the leaders of the warrior race waited for him. The alien princess, the one who ruled this world, sat on a raised throne, her piercing green eyes scanning him as if he were nothing more than an insect. She was beautiful, her features sharp and regal, with dark hair cascading down her back in waves. But there was something dangerous in her gaze, a sense of superiority, a belief that she was untouchable. Her gaze flickered over him, and the moment she spoke, her voice was like a blade cutting through the air. "You are the human, then?" she asked, her tone carrying the weight of a challenge. "I had heard of your kind. You think yourselves so powerful, so resourceful, but I do not believe it." The soldier remained calm, his posture straight as he nodded. "I am here to negotiate, not to fight." The princess leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Negotiation? Do you not understand where you are, human? You are on my planet. Here, we do not speak. We fight. You claim to be warriors, yet I find it hard to believe." She stood up from her throne, her movements graceful yet predatory. She stepped down to the floor, approaching the soldier with slow, deliberate steps. "Select your weapon, human. I will give you the chance to prove your worth. Choose wisely, for this will be a battle you cannot escape." The soldier looked at her, unfazed by her words. In fact, her challenge only made him more resolute. He had heard stories of this race, tall, strong, and deadly, but he wasn't here to fight with weapons. He wasn't here to play their games. His people had learned long ago that strength wasn't always found in weapons, and in a place like this, he would prove it. "I do not need a weapon," he said simply, his voice steady. "I will face you with my mind and my will." The princess blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting such an answer. For a moment, there was silence. The alien soldiers around the room exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. But the princess didn't flinch. Instead, she smirked, as if she were amused by his response. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "You think you can outsmart me? Then let the battle begin." Without a second thought, the soldier stepped forward, his eyes locked onto hers. His mind was racing, but he knew that there was only one way this would end, not with strength, but with strategy. The arena was massive, built for battles that tested strength and skill. It was an open space, surrounded by towering stone walls, with the alien soldiers watching from above. The floor was uneven, with obstacles scattered throughout. This was no ordinary duel. It was a test, a challenge to prove who was stronger. The soldier knew that he couldn't win in a direct confrontation, but his mind was sharp, and that was the only weapon he needed. The princess stood across from him, her body tensed, ready for the first strike. She was faster, stronger, and more experienced, but the soldier had something she didn't, an understanding of how to use his surroundings. The moment she lunged forward, he dodged, using the uneven ground to his advantage. He moved quickly, circling her, looking for any opening. She was fast, but he was patient, waiting for her to make the first mistake. The crowd of alien soldiers watched in silence, unsure of how to react. They had never seen a human fight like this before. The princess, too, was taken aback. She was used to dominating every opponent she faced, but this human was different. He wasn't fighting the way she had expected. He wasn't relying on strength. Instead, he was calculating, using his mind to outmaneuver her at every turn. Battle raged on, but the human never lost his focus. His every move was deliberate, every action designed to disorient her, to make her second-guess her next strike. He wasn't trying to defeat her with force. He was wearing her down, making her doubt her own superiority. The princess's frustration grew with every passing second. She was used to having control, to commanding respect with a mere glance, but the human was breaking through that arrogance, shattering the image she had of herself as an unstoppable force. This wasn't what she expected. This wasn't what she had been prepared for, but the soldier knew that the battle was far from over. The battle continued, the tension between the two warriors thickening with each passing moment. The princess had underestimated him, but now she was beginning to realize just how far that mistake had stretched. She had expected an easy fight, a quick victory that would prove her people's superiority. Instead, she found herself struggling against a human who refused to play by the rules. With every step, the soldier adapted. He wasn't fast, nor was he particularly strong, but he had learned long ago that brute force wasn't always the way to win. He understood the terrain, the angles, the rhythm of the fight. He knew how to anticipate his opponent's moves before they even happened. And with every second that passed, he could see the princess's confidence begin to slip away. The princess, for all her strength and skill, found herself growing frustrated. The human soldier was too quick, too clever. She had expected to easily overpower him, but instead he danced around her, keeping her off balance. She swung her blade, her strikes, sharp and powerful, but he was always just out of reach. He wasn't using any weapons, no blades, no armor. His only tool was his mind, and it was proving to be more than a match for her might. She tried again, launching herself forward with a sudden burst of speed, her blade aimed for his chest. But just before she struck, the soldier sidestepped, his feet sliding effortlessly across the uneven ground. She missed, and her momentum carried her past him, giving him the chance to strike back. But he didn't go for an offensive move. Instead, he pushed her to the ground, not with force, but with a calculated shift in weight. She hit the floor with a thud, the impact startling her. The crowd above them fell silent, watching in disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They had never seen one of their kind so easily outwitted by a human. The soldier stood over the princess, but instead of finishing the fight, he stepped back, giving her space. He wasn't here to kill her. He was here to show her that strength didn't always come from physical power. The princess stood up slowly, her eyes narrowed, her pride stinging from the unexpected turn of events. She could feel the eyes of her people on her, and the thought of being seen as weak was unbearable. She was the ruler of this planet, the one who commanded armies and led her people in battle. Yet here she was, bested by a human, and her reputation was hanging by a thread. But she wasn't the type to give up easily. She had been trained for years to never show weakness, to never back down. She had faced tougher opponents before, and she could face this human too. But something inside her told her that this battle was different. This human wasn't just another enemy to crush. He was something else, something she couldn't quite figure out. The soldier watched her carefully, his posture relaxed but alert. He knew she was preparing for another attack. But unlike before, he wasn't nervous. He wasn't worried about his survival. He had been in far worse situations before, and his calmness in the face of danger was his greatest weapon. The princess lunged at him again, this time faster, her blade a blur in the air. But the soldier was ready. He ducked under her strike, using the moment to move behind her. She spun around to face him, but by the time she did, He was already out of her reach. He had her on the defensive now, and he knew that it was only a matter of time before she made another mistake. Her breathing was heavier now, and the sweat on her brow betrayed her growing fatigue. She was used to dominating, to making her opponents fear her. But this human wasn't afraid. He wasn't intimidated by her size or her strength. He was playing a different game, one that she didn't understand, and it was working. The soldier didn't hesitate. He was quick to seize the opportunity, moving in close and using his body weight to push her back, forcing her to stumble. The crowd gasped in surprise. The princess had been thrown off balance, something that had never happened to her before. For the first time in the fight, doubt crossed her mind. Could she really win this battle? She tried to regain her composure, pushing herself up from the ground, but the soldier was already on the move again. He wasn't charging at her in a reckless frenzy like she had expected. Instead, he was calm, methodical, every move calculated. He wasn't in a hurry to end the fight, but he was slowly wearing her down. The princess's eyes burned with determination. She couldn't allow herself to lose. Not like this, not in front of her people. She had to show them that she was still the strongest, that nothing could break her. But as she prepared for another strike, the human soldier didn't retreat. He stood his ground, and this time, when she swung her blade at him, he didn't dodge. He caught it with his bare hands. There was a moment of stunned silence. The princess's weapon was held fast in the soldier's grip, his hands unshaken. He wasn't using strength to overpower her blade. He was using his mind, his focus, and his understanding of her every move. It was as if he knew exactly how she would strike before she even did it. For the first time, the princess felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear, but something close to it. Respect. The human soldier had shown her something she hadn't expected, that there were other ways to be powerful, other ways to win. And in that moment, she realized that this wasn't just a battle for dominance. It was a test of will, and the human was proving to be stronger than she had ever imagined. She stepped back, her gaze lingering on him, her mind racing. The fight was far from over, but now for the first time she wasn't sure who would come out on top. The princess stood tall, her breathing deep but steady. The fight had taken more out of her than she had anticipated, and her pride was starting to crack. The human soldier had proven himself to be far more than just an obstacle. He was an enigma, a being she couldn't read or predict, and that made him dangerous. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes still fixed on him. He was standing there, unscathed, his body calm and ready, showing no sign of exhaustion. He had proven that he wasn't just a weak, fragile human. In fact, he was a far better fighter than she had expected, even more resourceful than most of the warriors she had faced in her lifetime. But she couldn't let herself lose. Not like this. Not in front of her people. The human soldier remained still, watching her, but his calmness unnerved her more than she cared to admit. She was the princess of this world, the one who led her people to victory in countless battles. She was used to being the strongest, the one who commanded the respect of everyone around her. But now she was facing an opponent who saw past her title, someone who didn't care about her status or her strength. The crowd in the stands murmured, and the sound echoed in the arena. They could feel the tension between the two fighters. They had never seen anyone challenge the princess like this before. She had always been the one to defeat all who faced her, but now this human soldier was taking her to the limits of her strength. With a sharp intake of breath, the princess adjusted her stance. She needed to regain control. This wasn't just about defeating him. It was about proving her superiority, about showing that no one, not even a human, could beat her. She charged again, this time with a new intensity. Her movements were quick, powerful, but this time, the soldier didn't move. He stood his ground, his expression unchanged. He didn't seem worried, didn't flinch at the speed of her strikes. She was striking at him again and again. Her blade, a blur, but he was ducking and dodging, effortlessly evading her attacks. With every move, the princess grew more frustrated. She was faster, stronger, and more skilled, but it wasn't enough. The human was adapting too quickly, his movements too fluid, too unpredictable. She tried to force him into a corner, but he was always just a step ahead. It was as if he had been anticipating her every move. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and the princess saw something in his gaze, something she had never seen before. There was no fear, no hesitation. There was only determination, and the soldier wasn't looking at her like she was an enemy to defeat. He was looking at her like she was a puzzle to solve, a challenge to overcome. And somehow, that made her more uneasy than anything else. The soldier took a step forward, closing the distance between them. The princess instinctively raised her blade to defend herself, but this time, he didn't try to block it or dodge. Instead, he grabbed her wrist with one hand, his grip firm, and with the other, he pushed her blade away. It wasn't strength that overpowered her. It was his control, his ability to neutralize her attack with nothing more than technique. For a moment, the princess froze. She couldn't believe what was happening. She had never been disarmed like this before, never been so easily neutralized. Her grip on her weapon slipped, and before she knew it, the soldier had her in a hold, her weapon now useless in her hand. They were standing so close now, their faces mere inches apart. The princess could feel the heat of his breath against her skin, and it only added to the growing tension between them. This wasn't the battle she had imagined. This wasn't about brute strength. This was about something more, something deeper than she could comprehend. For a brief moment, she felt something unexpected, a flicker of respect for him. This human had proven that he wasn't just a warrior in the traditional sense. He was something different. He was smart, adaptable, and capable of thinking beyond the usual boundaries of combat. And that was something she hadn't anticipated. The soldier, his eyes still locked on hers, released her wrist slowly, letting her regain control of the situation. He wasn't pushing for a victory. He wasn't even taunting her. He was simply waiting, watching, as if he knew exactly what would happen next. The princess stepped back, her mind racing. She had always been in control. She had always been the one to lead her people to victory. But now, faced with a human who had outmaneuvered her at every turn, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had been trained for this, trained to fight, to lead, to win. But this human soldier was forcing her to rethink everything. He wasn't just a challenger. He was a mirror, reflecting everything she had taken for granted, and it made her realize just how little she knew about true strength. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for what would come next. Would the princess rise to the challenge, or would she admit defeat? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. The human soldier had done the impossible. He had broken through the walls of her arrogance, and now the princess had to decide whether to fight with everything she had left or to walk away, acknowledging that perhaps this human was more than a match for her. The silence in the arena grew heavy, like the calm before a storm. The princess, still breathing heavily, stood opposite the human soldier, her sword hanging loosely in her hand. Her mind was racing. She had faced countless opponents, but none had ever made her feel the way this human soldier did. He had caught her off guard, disarmed her, and now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could win this fight. The soldier didn't move. He simply watched her, his posture relaxed but ready. He was waiting, letting her decide what came next. His calmness was almost maddening. The princess couldn't help but feel the sting of frustration. She had been trained for this. Trained to be the best, to crush her enemies with sheer power and skill. But this human, who didn't follow the rules of battle she was used to, had thrown all of that into question. The crowd of alien spectators who had been quiet for a long time were now murmuring. They had expected the princess to win easily, but the longer the fight went on, the more they began to doubt their belief in her invincibility. They had never seen her struggle like this before. She was their champion, the one who never lost, the one who made them proud. But now they were watching her be outwitted by a human, and that, in itself, was a blow to their pride. The princess gripped her sword tighter, feeling the weight of her weapon in her hand. She couldn't afford to hesitate. If she lost here, if she allowed this human to beat her, it would mean more than just personal defeat. It would mean the downfall of everything she had worked for, everything her people had believed in. With a sharp breath, the princess launched herself at him again. This time she was faster, more focused. She wasn't just attacking blindly. She was calculating, studying his movements, looking for any sign of weakness. Her blade slashed through the air with deadly precision, aiming for the soldier's neck. But as she swung, the human soldier ducked and sidestepped, his movements fluid and quick, almost as if he anticipated her every move. He was making her look like an amateur. For the briefest moment, the princess felt a pang of disbelief. How could he be this good? How could a human, someone so physically inferior to her, keep up with her, let alone outsmart her at every turn? But there was no time for doubt. She had to win. The princess pressed on, attacking again and again, her strikes coming faster than before. She was relentless now, her mind sharpened by frustration and pride. She couldn't allow herself to lose. She couldn't let the human soldier be the one to defeat her. The soldier, meanwhile, was focused, but not with the same desperation that the princess felt. He wasn't fighting to prove anything. He wasn't driven by pride or anger. He was simply fighting because he knew that was the only way to survive. He knew the stakes. If he lost, he would die. But he had fought in worse situations, with higher stakes. This was just another challenge, one he would face with everything he had. He continued to dodge her strikes, moving in a way that seemed almost effortless. The princess was powerful, no doubt about it, but he had learned that in a fight, power didn't always win. It was the mind, the ability to read your opponent, to know when to strike and when to wait, that made all the difference. As the princess swung her sword once more, the soldier finally saw an opening. She was tired now, her movements slower, her breath coming in short gasps. She was still strong, but the constant barrage of failed strikes was taking its toll on her. The soldier moved in quickly, his body shifting like a shadow, and before the princess could react, he grabbed her wrist again, twisting it just enough to make her drop her sword. The princess stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. The human soldier had done it again. He had taken her weapon from her, and now, for the first time in this fight, she was truly unarmed. The crowd was dead silent now, waiting for the next move. They had never seen anything like this. The princess was the epitome of strength, of invincibility. Yet here she was, disarmed by a human who now stood before her, calm and steady. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing. The princess stood frozen, her mind racing. She had no weapon now, no way to fight back. Her pride, her belief in her own strength, had been shattered in front of everyone. She had to act, but she didn't know what to do. She had never been in this position before. Her mind was clouded with anger, confusion, and humiliation. The soldier, still holding her wrist, didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words. He had proven his point. He had shown her that strength wasn't always about power or skill. It was about adaptability, strategy, and the ability to learn from your mistakes. He had been patient, waiting for the right moment, and now that moment had arrived. The princess, still struggling to regain her composure, finally looked him in the eyes. Her gaze was no longer one of arrogance, but of something else, something deeper. She was seeing him for what he truly was, a warrior, yes, but also something more. He was someone who had faced insurmountable odds, someone who had refused to give up no matter what the situation was. And in that moment, the princess realized something she had never considered before. Maybe, just maybe, this human soldier was stronger than she was. Not in strength, not in power, but in a way that she had never understood. He wasn't here to dominate or conquer. He was here to survive, and that made him a force to be reckoned with. The soldier released her wrist slowly, giving her a moment to decide what to do next. The princess, her chest rising and falling with each breath, stared at him. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time the outcome was uncertain. The princess took a slow step back, her eyes still locked on the human soldier. Her mind was a whirlwind, each thought faster than the last. She had been defeated in ways she couldn't understand by someone who wasn't supposed to be able to beat her. The human had turned the tide of the battle with nothing more than strategy, using his wits to outsmart her at every turn. She had never experienced anything like this before, and it left her feeling uncertain in a way that was foreign to her. She was still the princess of this world, the leader of a proud warrior race. Her people looked to her for guidance, for strength, and yet here she was, in front of them, unable to hold her ground against a single human soldier. The pressure was building. She couldn't afford to appear weak, not in front of her warriors, not in front of anyone. Her reputation, her authority were on the line. The soldier stood there, not gloating, not taunting her. He was silent, waiting for her next move. His calmness only made her feel more unsettled. He wasn't like the warriors she had fought before. He wasn't driven by anger or pride. He fought with a quiet determination, something deeper than just the desire for victory. It was as if he wasn't fighting to prove himself. He was fighting because it was necessary. She gripped her sword tighter, the metal cold in her hand. She couldn't give up now. Not when so much was at stake. Her people were watching, waiting for her to strike back, to prove that their strength was unmatched. She had to show them that she was the one they followed, the one who could never be defeated. But there was a part of her, a small part, that knew she wasn't the same as she had been before this fight. The human soldier had changed something in her, made her see that strength wasn't just about raw power, it was about resilience, adaptability, and the ability to learn. He had shown her that even someone like her, who had always relied on strength and superiority, could be outmatched if they weren't careful. Taking a deep breath, the princess launched herself forward again. This time she was different. She wasn't charging in blindly. She was thinking, calculating her every move. The human soldier moved to intercept her, but she feinted, shifting to the side at the last moment. Her sword slashed through the air, aiming for his side, but once again, he dodged with ease, his movements smooth and deliberate. Frustration gnawed at her insides. She was faster this time, but it still wasn't enough. He was anticipating her moves, staying one step ahead. She pressed the attack, her strikes coming faster, her body moving with more force than before. But each time she tried to land a blow, he evaded her, his focus unwavering. He wasn't rushing, wasn't panicking. He was patient, waiting for the right moment, always staying just out of reach. The princess pushed forward again, determined not to let him slip away. She thought she saw an opening, a chance to land a strike. Her sword came down in a swift arc, aimed at his chest. But just as the blade was about to make contact, the soldier moved, his body flowing around her strike, as if he had already predicted it. His arm shot out, grabbing her wrist with a firm but gentle grip, stopping her momentum dead in its tracks. She gasped in surprise, unable to believe that he had caught her again. Her wrist was now locked in his grip, and she struggled against his hold. The soldier didn't force her. Instead, he used his knowledge of her movements, his understanding of her intentions, to make her actions seem slower, more predictable. For a moment, they stood there, staring at each other. The soldier's eyes were calm, focused. He wasn't looking at her as an enemy to be defeated. He was looking at her as if she were a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to be overcome. And that, more than anything else, made her feel vulnerable. Her pride, the very thing that had driven her throughout this entire battle, started to crack. She had never had to face an opponent like this before. Not someone who didn't fear her, who didn't try to crush her with sheer strength. It was a different kind of fight, one that was slowly wearing her down, piece by piece. The princess tried to pull away, but the soldier's grip was unyielding. She could feel the strength in his hands, but it wasn't the kind of strength that relied on brute force. It was the strength of control, of restraint. It was a quiet power that left her feeling more defeated than any blow could have. And then, for the first time in the entire fight, the princess stopped struggling. She didn't pull away. She didn't push forward. She stood there, her wrist still in his hand, and she looked at him. She looked at the human soldier in a way she hadn't before. This wasn't about winning anymore. It wasn't about proving who was stronger. It was about understanding. The soldier seemed to sense the shift in her, and he slowly released her wrist, allowing her to regain her stance. He didn't make a move to attack. He wasn't trying to take advantage of the moment. He simply waited. There was no arrogance in his posture, no desire to flaunt his victory. There was just patience, and that patience seemed to weigh heavily on her. The princess stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to do anymore. She had always known what came next in a battle. She had always known that she would be the one to strike the final blow. But this time she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if she could continue the fight, if she could keep pretending that she was invincible. She took another step back, her gaze still fixed on him. He wasn't waiting for her to make a move. He was simply watching her, letting her come to her own decision. And for the first time, the princess realized that this fight wasn't just about strength. It was about something far deeper, something she had never understood before. The human soldier had shown her that true power wasn't about domination. It was about resilience, and for the first time, she understood that the fight wasn't over yet. The princess stood motionless, her eyes never leaving the human soldier. She had been the one who led armies to victory, the one who had crushed all who challenged her. But here she was, caught in a battle that she had not expected. She was not sure if it was pride, anger, or something else entirely that kept her from stepping away, but she was trapped in a mental struggle now, not just a physical one. The soldier, as always, stood still, waiting. His expression was calm, as if the outcome didn't matter to him. He wasn't trying to break her spirit. He wasn't rushing to end the battle. He simply existed in the moment, aware and composed. It was a quality she could neither ignore nor comprehend. The longer they faced each other, the more it seemed like the battle was something different now, more than a fight for victory. The princess gripped her sword tighter, though her arms were beginning to ache from the strain. She could feel the weight of her people's expectations on her shoulders. They were watching, waiting for her to prove she was the strongest. She couldn't afford to lose. Her reputation, her authority, everything she had fought for was on the line. She had never fought someone like this before, someone who didn't rely on brute strength but on calmness and strategy. It was frustrating. How could she, someone who had won battle after battle, be so completely stumped by this human? She had expected to defeat him quickly, but he had matched her blow for blow, always just a step ahead. And now she had to confront the reality. The human soldier was good. He was very good. The soldier spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't have to keep fighting. We both know how this ends." The princess flinched, a flash of irritation crossing her face. How could he say that? How could he think that the battle was already over? She had to prove herself, had to show that she wasn't just another leader who could be toppled. She had to remain the symbol of power that her people relied on. But his words had struck a chord. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Did it have to end like this? Did she really need to keep fighting, or had she already lost? She shook her head slightly, trying to clear the fog in her mind. No, she was not going to back down. Not here, not now. With a roar of defiance, the princess charged again, her blade aimed straight at the soldier's chest. This time, she was faster, more determined. She would make him see that she wasn't done yet, that she still had the strength to win. Her movements were swift and controlled, each strike more powerful than the last. She was pushing him back, forcing him to retreat. But, again, the soldier didn't seem to panic. He moved with the same calm efficiency as before, evading each of her strikes with ease. It was as if he could see everything she was going to do before she even did it. Her blade sliced through the air, narrowly missing him, and she felt her frustration building. Why couldn't she land a hit? Why couldn't she break through his defenses? She moved in again, faster this time, but the soldier was waiting. Just as she swung her blade, he stepped to the side and grabbed her wrist. In one smooth motion, he twisted her arm, forcing her to drop her weapon to the ground. She barely had time to react before he was behind her, his arm around her waist, holding her in place. For a moment, the world around her seemed to stop. The soldier's grip was firm but not cruel. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was simply stopping her, controlling the fight without causing harm. It wasn't about overpowering her. It was about outthinking her. The realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't fighting him on his terms. She was fighting on hers, and she had been outplayed. She struggled against his hold, but it was no use. The human soldier had her, and for the first time, she realized she couldn't break free. She wasn't sure whether it was the tightness of his grip or the realization that this was the end of the fight, but she felt a sense of defeat wash over her. She had given everything, every ounce of strength, every moment of focus, but it still wasn't enough. "Do you see now?" the soldier said, his voice steady, almost gentle. "It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about power. It's about knowing when to fight and when to let go." The princess was silent, her chest rising and falling with each breath. His words echoed in her mind, and she found herself unable to argue. All her life she had believed that strength and power were the only things that mattered. But now, in the face of this human soldier, she saw the truth. Strength alone wasn't enough. She had been so focused on winning, on proving herself, that she had overlooked the most important thing of all, understanding. She felt him loosen his grip slightly, giving her room to breathe. The battle was over. She had lost. But somehow, she didn't feel the sting of failure that she had expected. Instead, there was a strange sense of peace, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The soldier stepped back, releasing her completely. She turned to face him, her expression no longer one of defiance, but of acknowledgement. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. This battle had changed her. She had been forced to face her own weaknesses, to realize that even the strongest could be outmatched if they weren't careful. The princess straightened up, meeting the soldier's gaze. Her pride was still there, but it was no longer the thing that defined her. She wasn't the unbeatable ruler she had once been. She was something more now, someone who had learned, who had adapted. The soldier nodded, a small, almost respectful gesture. "You fought well," he said. For the first time in the entire battle, the princess smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory, but one of understanding. She had fought him as hard as she could, but in the end, she had learned something more valuable than any victory could give her. She had learned what it meant to truly fight, and, perhaps more importantly, what it meant to learn from defeat. The arena was silent, save for the heavy breaths of the two fighters. The princess stood in the center, her sword now lying forgotten on the ground beside her. Her armor, once gleaming and proud, now seemed heavy, as though the weight of the battle had finally settled in. The human soldier, standing a few paces away, watched her with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the fight. He had won. But unlike the other battles she had fought, there was no celebration, no triumph in his eyes. There was only quiet understanding. The crowd of alien spectators watched the scene in stunned silence. They had come to see the princess, their revered leader, crush the human, to prove once again that their people were superior. But instead they had witnessed a moment of realization, a moment where power was not measured by physical strength alone. The princess had been defeated, yes, but something deeper had shifted within her, something the audience could not understand. She had learned something that would forever change how she saw herself and her people. The soldiers. Calmness had broken through her armor, not just physically but mentally. He had defeated her not through strength, but through patience, strategy, and the courage to adapt. For all her skill, for all her power, she had been outmaneuvered by someone who had no need for grandeur or pride. And now, she stood there, feeling something she had never felt before: uncertainty. The soldier took a step forward, his footsteps steady on the uneven ground. He wasn't walking toward her to gloat or claim victory. He was simply moving forward, acknowledging the end of the fight. As he approached, the princess stood taller, her chin lifted, but there was no defiance in her posture anymore. There was only acceptance. "You fought well," the soldier said, his voice as steady as it had been throughout the fight. "Better than I expected." The words hit her harder than any strike had. They were not the words of someone who had won easily. They were words of respect, words acknowledging her strength, even as he had bested her. She had expected mockery, ridicule, but instead she received recognition. It felt strange to her, strange in a way that made her question everything she thought she knew. The princess slowly turned away from him, her gaze sweeping over the vast arena. The weight of the eyes upon her was still there, but it felt different now. The alien soldiers, her people, were still watching, but the proud expressions they had once held were now mixed with confusion. She could feel the shift in their perception. The human soldier had done more than just defeat her. He had made them see her differently. Not as an untouchable leader, but as someone who could be humbled, someone who had learned and grown. For a long moment she stood there, the noise of the crowd becoming muffled in her ears. She had always believed that power was what kept her in control. She had believed that strength, dominance, and fear were the things that made a leader. But now, after everything she had experienced, she was beginning to see that perhaps those things weren't the answer. Perhaps the true power lay in something else. Something she hadn't considered before. The power to learn, to change, to accept defeat with grace and rise from it stronger than before. The human soldier stood behind her, silent, but present. She could feel his presence there, but it wasn't threatening. It wasn't the kind of presence that demanded submission. It was a presence that simply existed, steady and unwavering. He had shown her that sometimes the greatest strength came not from overpowering others, but from understanding them, from being willing to change and adapt in the face of adversity. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "What happens now?" The soldier didn't answer immediately. He simply regarded her for a moment, as though considering the weight of her question. The battle was over, yes, but the questions she had now weren't about winning or losing. They were about something far deeper. "What happens now," he began slowly, "is up to you. "What do you want to happen now?" Her eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, she saw not a conqueror, but an equal. He wasn't telling her what to do. He wasn't demanding anything from her. He was giving her the choice, the freedom to decide what came next. It was a humbling thing, this freedom to choose, and in that moment, she realized that she had always had it. She had always had the power to choose, but had never understood its true value. She looked out over the arena once more, at her people, at her warriors who had once been so sure of her invincibility. And now, they were unsure. They had seen their leader fall, seen her struggle and be defeated. But they had also seen her rise again, not physically, but mentally. They had seen her learn and adapt. And in that moment, she realized that her strength didn't come from her victories. It came from her ability to face failure and rise from it. She turned back to the soldier, her expression no longer one of frustration or pride, but one of clarity. "What happens now," she repeated, "is that we work together. I learn from you, and you learn from me." The soldier nodded, his expression showing no surprise. He had known this was coming. He had known that the princess was more than just a warrior. She was a leader who could learn, who could change. It was just a matter of her realizing it herself. The princess took a deep breath and straightened up. She wasn't the same person who had entered the arena. She wasn't the same warrior who had been so sure of her own superiority. She was something else now. Someone who had seen the value of humility, of understanding, and of learning from those around her. As the crowd began to murmur, the princess took one final look at the human soldier. She didn't need to defeat him. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already learned the most important lesson of all. And that, in itself, was victory enough.